Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney, and today we are talking about Ponte fabric, what that means, how we shop for it, uses, hopefully answering any questions that you might have about Ponte fabric and all of those things. But before we get into it, a couple of announcements. Number one, we have a Love Notions Feature Friday pattern today, and it's a good one. It's the Legato jeans and the course. They've got a jean sewing course there at Love Notions, are both on sale today for Feature Friday for $6. And if you use my code SEW TKS10, I'll put it right here. That's my current code. You can get an additional 10% off those sale prices. Fantastic jean pattern. It's kind of a choose your own adventure type of thing where you can choose if you need a curvier waistband. So if you're someone that has, you notice that you get the gaping in the back of your jeans, you may want the curvier waistband versus a straight waistband, which is what I use because I'm straighter through that area. You can do regular rear end versus a full seat. Petite, regular, tall is an option, and that's not just shortening the legs, it's shortening rise as well as legs. What else? I feel like there's something else that's in there. Anyway, comes in their full size range from 0 to 32. It's a really great jean pattern. I've made it a couple of times. So anyway, that is the Feature Friday pattern sale. Also, if you've been following along the channel, and this is gonna kind of pertains into today's video a little bit, but the collaboration that I have with Love Notions, the new Bridget trouser pattern, is still on release sale right now. If you want to go ahead and grab that. My personal code does not work for the Bridgets because I am a co-collaborator on that pattern. But you can use any of the other ambassador codes to get that 10% off that even the release sale price right now. So it's $9.50 right now. It will go back to its regular price of $12.50 after Monday. I think Monday is the last day. So if that's one that you've been kind of hanging on to, you absolutely want to go ahead and grab that, and I will link the pattern down below. But yeah, look at the other ambassadors for their codes. To use those for that pattern. My code works on all the other patterns for the Love Notions catalog, though, including today's Feature Friday. Okay, let's talk about Ponte fabric. I get so many questions about fabrics, period. Just run the gamut. And especially now that we've gone to such a heavily focused on online shopping now with fabric. We've lost Joann's here in the US, but I mean, fabric stores, brick and mortar fabric stores have really disappeared. Not completely, like they're still out there, and there's nothing that I love more than shopping for fabric in person. But depending on where you live, especially, and I am even in a metropolitan area, and I do have a couple of fabric stores that are near to me, but they're smaller stores, so they're pick of maybe if I'm looking for something absolute, like something very specific, the pick could be a little bit hit or miss depending on, because they only keep so much inventory. They're not going to keep everything. So anyway, sometimes the online shopping is the only way to go. So we're talking about all things Ponte. I have a couple of examples here that I'm going to be talking you through as we go. And this all pertains to the new Bridget trouser patterns because that is a pattern for your workwear trouser that has a functioning zip fly. It closes with either a button and buttonhole or a hook and bar at the top, slash pockets. It's got a faux welt or functional welt pocket on the back. So it really is a work style trouser. I have so many ideas for ways that we can hack this pattern as well going forward. Anyway, I have lots of plans for a couple more versions for myself because this is why I went collaborated on it with Love Notions is because it's a pattern that I have been wanting in my wardrobe in many different iterations for a while now. And yes, and now is the time. So I want to make all of them. Also, Karina from Lifting Pins and Needles made a pair of shorts with this pattern. And I'm like, I didn't even know that I needed a pair of shorts in this. But now I'm probably going to need a pair of shorts. Probably not until, I get back into short season. But she's in the Southern Hemisphere, so she's on opposite seasons than I am. But anyway, so apparently I need shorts now too. So anyway, so many ideas for that. But we're going to talk about what Ponte is. Some uses for Ponte, why you might want this in your stash or why you might want to sew with Ponte fabric, and then how to shop for it online. I'll specifically talk a little bit about the Bridget, but also even if you're not sewing the Bridget, for any type of project that you might be working for or looking for fabric for that. And then finally, some tips and tricks if you are using Ponte is how we're going to end this video. So let's get into what is Ponte fabric. So sometimes you may see this as just Ponte, and that's Ponte. A lot of times you will see it as Ponte de Roma, which is Pontede and then Roma. Same type of fabric. It is basically a double knit, very similar to like a cotton interlock. You may have heard of interlock, which is also a double knit. What that means is when it was knitted on the knitting machine, it was knit double. So instead of a jersey would be an example of a single knit. So when you think about a scarf, for instance, that was knit in just regular knit purl, you've got one side, you've got the little V's, it's the knit side, and the back side is the purl side. If you're looking at a jersey fabric, that's what you see. You see the ribs on one side, and on the back, you see those little pearls if you look really, really closely on a jersey. This is a cotton spandex jersey knit. These are the types of knits tend to curl. They'll curl to the right side when you, which can be so annoying when you're trying to sew, trying to put a neckband in, and everything, the neckband's curling, and it'll curl opposite ways, and you're trying to get it onto the neckband. Can be very, very annoying. That is a single knit. Double knit it's done on either side. So when you look at either side of a Ponte fabric, you cannot tell which is right side, which is wrong side. You just can pick which one you want to use. But it looks the same on both sides. But because it's a double knit, that means it doesn't curl, which makes it a very stable knit and one that is fantastic if you are new to sewing with knits, because it kind of takes out, because it's stable, it takes out some of the issues that you may have with thinner knits or curling knits such as those jerseys. So that is what Ponte fabric is specifically. Some blends that you will see of Ponte, you'll see a ton of polyester Ponte. That is kind of when Ponte kind of came onto the scene, probably 60s, 70s, it was heavily polyester. That was kind of the era of polyester. Not my preference. I find that it pills really badly, and yeah, that is not my preference. But you will still see it out there, the 100% polyester Pontes. I prefer, my favorite blend of Pontes is a rayon nylon spandex blend. However, I do appreciate a Ponte that has maybe rayon or viscose and maybe a polyester and spandex, as long as the rayon viscose is the larger percentage than the polyester. Sometimes that gives it just a little bit more structure depending on what I'm making with it. But I would say that my favorite, when I'm looking for Ponte, it is that rayon or viscose nylon spandex. Now, those blends can come in different percentages. That could be a, 70% rayon, 20%, nylon, 10% spandex, or that could be a 50% rayon, a 40% nylon and, 10% spandex. It could be different percentages of what those are, and we don't always have that kind of information. But that is kind of what Ponte is, and I'll talk a little bit about when we are buying and what that kind of looks like. Uses for Ponte. Ponte tends to be a little bit more stable, although not all Pontes are created equally. So you will have some that have a little bit more drape, but even then, even if it is a very high rayon or viscose blend, it will still have more structure than, say, a rayon, viscose, spandex jersey. It will still have a lot more structure than that, which makes Ponte really great for more structured items. So like bodycon type dresses, or even sheath dresses, knit sheath dresses. It comes in really well as other dresses, even with a little bit of fuller skirt. If you want something where the skirt stands away from the body just a little bit, but still has that swishability, Ponte is fantastic for that. Wrap dresses, as long as you're not getting too thick, it can be really great for something along those lines. Great for trousers, really wonderful for like a knit pencil skirt. It works really, really great. Some tops, and again, kind of depending on the thickness and the weight of the Ponte that you're using, but I would say more structured tops. So maybe something that is more of a fitted bodice with like a structural sleeve. It works really great for that. Ponte is also a great substitute if you are wanting to make a woven pattern out of knit fabric. So if you have, for instance, a woven pattern for a fit and flare dress, Ponte is a great substitute where a lot of times you can get away with using a Ponte fabric and omitting zippers because you can pull that garment over your head and you don't need that zipper. Because Pontes are a little bit more stable, they make it much easier to sew darts in. So even if it is a pattern that has darts because it's meant for a woven fabric, Ponte is a great substitute for that. So it's really a wonderful fabric. Again, if you are a beginner sewist and you've never sewn with knits, I highly recommend Ponte because it is so much easier to handle. Okay, so those are kind of the uses for Ponte fabric. If you are someone that is newer to sewing, specifically with knits, we do have a free ebook with lots of wonderful tips and tricks on sewing with knits, and I will leave a link down to that. It's free on our website, and I will leave a link down to that below if you are interested in that. But that is kind of, there's lots of good tips and tricks over there on working with knit fabrics, and those would all apply to Ponte fabrics. All right, let's talk about shopping for Ponte. Again, we are almost all of us shopping online now, and it can be difficult because you're not feeling the fabric, and there can be sometimes we've got a lot of information on those listings for the fabric. Sometimes while there may be a ton of information there, it still doesn't quite substitute for being able to feel and touch fabrics. So sometimes we just have to take a gamble. My biggest recommendation when shopping online is to find some fabric shops that you trust. So a lot of the independent fabric companies have fantastic customer service. And when it comes to something like Ponte, a lot of times these are fabric lines that they carry all the time. So you don't have to worry about them selling out and not getting more, which means it makes it a perfect fabric to get some samples. A lot of fabric companies will send you samples in the mail. Sometimes that can be hit or miss because by the time you get the sample, maybe that fabric is sold out. But when it comes to solids and staple items such as a Ponte fabric, a lot of times it's something that fabric shop is keeping in stock. So it can be a good one to grab those samples for. So things that we often see on a fabric listing, and I am going to talk specifically about what I recommend for my new pattern if that is something that you are interested in learning about. But some things that we are going to see is we're going to see stretch percentage. That is, and we don't always see all of these things on the fabric listing, but these are really good ones to have if you do see them. It is great and can really help you make a very educated choice. So stretch percentage. This is how much your fabric stretches. So a lot of times, whether it is, this is cross grain, so this is from selvage to selvage. So this is the horizontal and then the vertical. Ponte, most of the time, will stretch both ways, but some people call that two-way stretch. Some call it four-way stretch. Whatever, it stretches both ways. Most of the time, Ponte does have that. The Bridget trousers, for instance, just need a 25% stretch across at least. So this has more than 25%. So I could easily use this fabric. In fact, I've used this fabric for the Bridgets, but you can, not the specific one, but the same in a different color. But this is a great one to use, but you want to make sure you have at least 25% stretch. So check your pattern. You want to make sure you have at least a certain percentage when you're working with knit patterns. If you are using Ponte with a woven, it doesn't matter because you're using a woven pattern. But yes, that is something that you first want to take into consideration. The next thing that I, again, like to look at is content. So again, my preference is a rayon or viscose, same thing, interchangeable words, nylon spandex blend. But again, if it is rayon, viscose, polyester, spandex, I will be okay with that. Polyester tends to be a little bit more structured than the nylon. I just want a higher percentage of the viscose rayon versus the polyester. I want to make sure that the viscose rayon is a higher percentage. Not always will you have this information. Sometimes it'll just say rayon, nylon, viscose or spandex blend, and you're not going to know those percentages. Typically, it is listed in the order of like a ingredient list on the back of a box. It is listed in what is the highest. So if it's listed rayon, nylon, spandex, the higher is the rayon, and then the nylon and spandex being the smallest. I mean, I can't say that that is always the case, but that is typically the case. So that is kind of what you're looking for. Again, if it's a rayon poly, I will look at that. I do find that when it comes to pilling and Ponte fabric, those with higher polyester content tend to be the ones that pill. I don't have that issue when I'm using the rayon. So just something to keep the rayon nylon. So just something to keep in mind. The other thing that will a lot of times be listed on fabric listing could possibly be the weight. Now, this will a lot of times, and again, not always, but this is something that's good to look for because sometimes the fabric designer or the fabric stores don't know. Now, you could figure it out. What the weight of the fabric is it's literally a square yard of fabric that is being weighed. So that is ounces. If it is a square meter of fabric, that is usually listed in GSM, which is grams per square meter. There are lots of calculators online. If you're able to read, okay, this is 350 GSM, but you're wondering what that is in ounces, there's a lot of calculators online where you can look at that to convert either way. It's just imperial versus metric. So it doesn't really matter what the fabric store lists. You can say, okay, well, what's a 9-ounce Ponti? Like, what is that in GSM? Very easy to look that up again online. Just search ounces to GSM calculator and a ton of stuff pops up. So very, very easy to convert back and forth. Now, for my Bridgets, I do recommend something in the range of like 320 GSM up to about 400 GSM. That's a really good weight for trousers. And I think that comes up to like 9.5 ounces up to maybe 11 ounces, I think, in that range. I actually prefer the metric when it comes to weights of fabric. But there are some outliers in there, and that has to do with content, again, on what the makeup is of the fabric. So we're purely looking at weight. And why this is a really good indicator of how thick a fabric is going to be, sometimes it's not telling us the whole story, and I'll explain what I mean there in a second. But that is kind of the range that I am looking for. Now, when the Bridgets that I have made, so any kind of, this is great for bottom weight. So if you're making something, a pair of Ponte trousers, or maybe a pencil skirt, something that you don't want to show a lot of lumps and bumps, you want it to be a little bit more structured, I would recommend something in that range. You go below that, and you're going to be, really great for more dresses and maybe tops. Going above that, which you could totally be the case, you're looking at, you could probably get a pair of trousers. You just may want to use a different fabric for facings because it may start to get a little bit thick and get a little bit too much bulk, like at the zip fly or maybe the waistband. But you could absolutely use maybe something a little bit thinner for waistband facings, that sort of stuff. Pocketing, you're going to want to use, well, in the Bridgets, you use a lightweight woven fabric for the inside pockets, which kind of creates a little bit of a tummy stay on the inside of your pants, which is also lovely. But you could probably go above that 400 with a pair of trousers, just keeping in mind some of your seams may get a little bit bulky. Blazers, any kind of a knit blazer would be really, really great if you're going up higher than that in weight. Now, there are some really great places. I will talk about some of my favorite Pontes that I've used specifically for the Bridgets, but also some other places where I've had really good luck finding Ponte fabric as well. So we'll talk about that here at the end, so stay tuned. But let's talk about weight. So this is the Papilio Ponte from Mood Fabrics, and it literally comes in like 30 colors. So when you see the colors, when you pull up the listing of any of theirs, there's like a little plus and it says more. You click that and so many colors drop down, so many options. It is a 390 GSM, I believe. And I have used this, my very first pair of what are now the Bridgets, but when I was messing around and hacking patterns to make my ideal Ponte trouser, this was the first fabric that I used in a different color, and it works perfectly. It makes a really great pair of Bridgets. And this is on a little bit of the heavier end. So you can tell that this is a very structured Ponte. So it's not quite as stretchy, but it's got enough stretch that we need going both ways. But it is a very structured, meaning when I take a little bit of it and hold it, it does not fall in on itself very much. Now this is a rayon nylon blend, spandex blend. So this does have rayon and nylon. Rayon is the top there. But this fabric that I got from Fabric Mart, also a rayon nylon blend, and I don't know what it did not have the percentage breakdown, like how much is the rayon, how much is the nylon. I just know that it is a rayon nylon spandex blend. This is clearly higher rayon because this is a much drapier fabric. However, when looking at weight, it's very similar in weight to this because rayon is a heavy fiber. So when we have a higher rayon content, it's going to be a heavier fabric. So that is going to be a higher GSM or ounces, even though it may not necessarily, I would not make a pair of Bridget trousers out of this because it is too drapey. This is going to show lumps and bumps. This would be perfect for a dress. I would make a sheath dress out of this. I would definitely make a dress that's got like a fuller skirt out of this, like a t-shirt dress. This would be great for a t-shirt dress, that sort of thing. And maybe even maybe a top. It might be a little thick for some tops, but if it was like a fitted top with like a statement sleeve, something like a bishop sleeve or something that I want a little bit of movement in, it would be really great for that. But I would not make trousers out of this. It's definitely too drapey. So, but that could be confusing because it's a similar weight to what this is. So we want something with structure. Another thing that is really nice, especially by a lot of the independent fabric stores now, is that a lot of times they will list uses, so suggested uses. If they've listed trousers down there, there's a good chance that you're going to know that, okay, these are going to be really great for a pair of trousers. You may disagree a little bit. You know, there is obviously some room for, you know, opinion there. So it may not always hit, but again, we just have to take a gamble sometimes when it comes to shopping for fabric online. This I bought from Fabric Mart and it was on a really good sale. And I bought quite a few different colors at the time when they were having a Ponte sale. And I had 3 of the fabrics that came in that were clearly the same. It was this in a yellow, this color, and in a red. And I've made dresses out of the yellow and the red. I still have a little bit of both of those left over. And I'll probably do a dress out of this. And then the other 3 colors that I ordered at the same time were clearly a different fabric. They had a little bit higher nylon content, and so they were much more structured. And I would have used those for trousers as opposed to these. So there is some room for, you know, it's not a perfect science. So again, you just gotta kind of trust. And if you think you're buying it for one thing and it comes in, you know, if it's a color that you love, save it and use it for a different project. You may just have to still be on the hunt for a heavier weight Ponte if you are in fact making trousers, for instance. So you just may have to use it for a dress instead of trousers like you were planning. But I am going to discuss where I bought the fabric for my Bridgets here in the US, and I've got some suggestions as well for other places if you're in other parts of the world. Okay, tips and tricks before we get into that. Because we have got a heavier content of rayon, a lot of times our Pontes can grow. And I've talked about this in the viscose video that I did, but I was talking about viscose jersey. We want to stabilize seams. So whether that, if you're making a dress, you want to stabilize those shoulder seams. Trousers, if you're making the Bridget trousers, stabilizing that crotch seam is going to make a world of difference. It's just like with linen pants. That crotch is going to grow throughout the course of the day unless you stabilize it. My orange pair that I made, if you watch Tuesday's video, I'm actually going to go back and stabilize that crotch seam, which you can totally do. I just sew into that crotch from the bottom of the fly up through the back. I'm going to sew a piece of cotton twill tape. And I've done a video on that too, a short, I think. It may have been just in my membership though, now that I'm thinking about it, I can't remember. Anyway, I'm just sewing a piece of cotton twill tape from the bottom of the fly all the way to the back, and you can do that after the fact, but making sure that I'm cutting it, you know, I'll wash and dry my pants to make sure that that crotch seam is as close to as where it's supposed to be as possible, and then, you know, sew in that twill tape so that it's 1-to-1, but that will keep that from stretching out as I wear that. So those are really good tips and tricks for making sure that you like your pants as you wear them throughout the day, because rayon will grow as it's worn. Rayon will also shrink, so you want to be careful washing and drying it too much. I would maybe wash and air dry occasionally, but if you're noticing that they are bagging out a little bit, a wash and a dry will get those right back into correct order. Okay, walking foot is important. You can use a lot of times a straight stitch with Pontes because you don't necessarily need the stretch, but definitely look at your pattern to make that decision. On the Bridgets, you could use straight stitch the whole way because there's positive ease in all those areas, and I did. I sewed my Bridgets on my sewing machine with a straight stitch, and then I serged seams afterwards. I kind of treated it as a woven, but I did use a walking foot. That is important because you don't want that fabric stretching out and your seams getting really weird and wonky. Okay, if you are wanting to make a pair of Ponte trousers, not just specifically the Bridgets, any kind of pattern that you're wanting to use Ponte with, I have had a lot of really good luck finding fabrics at Mood. Like I said, their Papilio is fantastic, comes in a ton of colors. Serge Fabrics, I will leave all this listed down below, but Serge Fabrics, which is located in Missouri, my old stomping grounds kind of, she has a lot of really great options. She has a Ponte twill that I've used for a pair. Her solid Ponte I've not used, but it is the same weight as the Ponte twill, so I think it would probably work just as well. And then her plaid Ponte that she has, that is also what I used for one of my pairs, and it worked really, really well. The Sewing Studio, I have used one of her Pontes, the Rust Red. That worked fantastic, and that was a really, really great one to use. Style Maker Fabrics has got a couple of different, they've got a couple of different Pontes. And they're a little bit different weight, but she does list the ounces there, so that's something very good to look into, and she does do samples if you're curious. If you're in Canada, both Blackbird and Closet Core's got some really good Pontes right now in a lot of really good colors. They do come from China, so that's going to be heavily tariffed for us US customers. But if you're in Canada, absolutely take a look. In fact, I really wanted to try Closet Core's Ponte, but I think it's just going to be way too expensive because of the tariffs coming into the US because it's China. The fabric originated in China. But also Fabric and Flow there in Canada has got some more stable knits as well. And I would absolutely take a look at her site too. UK, we've got Minerva. Minerva has some fantastic Pontes, and I have used with great success. So that would probably be my go-to. But again, I would try Guthrie and Ghani. I mean, there's so many good independent fabric stores that are both brick and mortar as well as online shops to take a look at. Anyway, leave those down. I'm not sure off the top of my head about Australia, but let me know if you are in a different part of the world, where do you buy your Ponte, and what would you suggest for something that is a little bit more trouser appropriate, less dress appropriate, and leave those in the comments down below so we can all find those. Yeah. That is everything I think that I can think of that about Ponte fabric. If you've got any other additional questions that I have not answered, leave those down below and I will answer those as I receive them. I think that's it for today, guys. Everything you needed to know about Ponte. I hope that this was informative and helpful, and get some sewing in. I am going to be doing some sewing this weekend. I'm very excited to be in my sewing room. I am sewing through grief, so is what I'm doing right now, and I'm finding it very therapeutic. So I hope you get into your sewing room as well. I will see you guys again on Tuesday, and until then, happy sewing.